Chapter 10. When It Rains Again. Rain returned to Willow Cove like an old memory. It didn't pour, it lingered. A steady, rhythmic tapping on windows, roofs, and hearts. The kind of rain that made everything quiet down, like even the world needed to think. Ethan and I sat on the porch, wrapped in a single blanket, his coffee growing cold in his hand, mine half drunk and forgotten. The lake shimmered beneath the soft gray sky. I had always loved this kind of weather, melancholy but honest. I used to hate the rain, he said quietly. I looked at him. After Anna passed, the first rain that came, I broke down in the middle of the kitchen. It reminded me of her, of how the world kept turning like it didn't care she was gone. I reached for his hand. I get that. He squeezed it gently. But now, sitting here with you, I think, maybe it's not the world forgetting. Maybe it's the world trying to wash some of the grief away. The words sat between us like a shared confession. Later that afternoon, I received a phone call from my sister, Marin. It had been months since we'd spoken. You sound different, she said, her voice warm but cautious. Lighter. I feel different. How's the quiet life treating you? I hesitated but smiled. It's not always quiet, but it's honest. She paused. I'm glad you left. I was angry at first, but I get it now. You needed to break apart before you could come back to yourself. I blinked back tears. Thank you. You coming home anytime soon? I looked at Ethan, who was now sketching a bird perched on the porch railing. I don't know if I'll ever live there again, but I'm not running anymore. That night, the power flickered and died. We lit candles, built a fire, and played old records on the battery-powered speaker Ethan kept for emergencies. We danced barefoot in the living room, the floor creaking beneath us, the rain tapping in time. You always dance when it storms? I teased. He smiled. Only when the company's this good. Later, wrapped in each other's arms, we lay in bed listening to the rain. You think it'll always be this peaceful? I asked. He kissed my shoulder. No, but I think we'll learn to weather it, and somehow that was more comforting than any promise of perfection. Because love, I had learned, wasn't the absence of pain. It was the choice to stay when it rains again. Chapter 11. What We Choose to Keep. A few weeks after the rain, I found myself reorganizing the attic space in the cottage. The afternoon light filtered in through the small round window, catching the dust in golden swirls. It was a quiet day. Ethan had gone into town to pick up new art supplies, and I felt the pull to face something I'd been avoiding. A box labeled Old Life. I had packed it in a hurry the night I left the city. 5 years of marriage, memories, pain, shoved into cardboard and sealed with trembling hands. I opened it slowly. There were photo albums, wedding cards, hospital discharge papers, and a tiny pair of knitted booties I'd bought the day I found out I was pregnant. I held them to my chest, felt the sharp twist in my stomach, the echo of a heartbeat that had once pulsed inside me. I let myself cry, not like before, not breaking, but releasing, honoring. There was also a journal I hadn't remembered packing. The handwriting was mine, scrawled and hurried. Inside were pages written late at night, in bathrooms, at kitchen tables, in waiting rooms. I flipped to one entry dated 3 days after the miscarriage. I can't feel anything but emptiness. Everyone keeps telling me to be strong. I want to scream. I want to sleep for a year. I want to believe this pain has a purpose. I closed the book, hands shaking. Then I lit a candle, sat cross-legged on the floor, and made 2 piles. What I keep and what I release. The booties, the journal, I kept. The hospital bills, the cards, I let go. Some things deserve to be part of my new life. Not to haunt me, but to remind me how far I'd come. That evening, when Ethan returned, he found me on the porch with the journal in my lap. Long day? He asked. I nodded. I went back. Just for a while. He sat beside me. And I'm okay. It hurt. But I'm okay. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the air heavy with unspoken memories. I still carry her, I said softly, tapping the journal. Our daughter. even if she never took a breath. Ethan didn't speak. He just pulled me into his arms and held me the way no words ever could. "You don't have to carry it alone," he whispered into my hair. And maybe that's what love is. Not forgetting the pain, but finding someone who says, "Let me help you hold it." Chapter 12. The Color of Tomorrow. Fall arrived quietly in Willow Cove, brushing the trees with amber and rust, painting the town in slow nostalgia. The lake cooled, the air turned crisp, and with each passing day I felt more rooted, like the place and the man beside me had somehow stitched me back together. Ethan's art had changed too. The canvases he once left half-finished now glowed with new colors. Warm golds, deep violets, hopeful greens. He told me once that he didn't paint what he saw, but what he felt. And lately, his paintings felt like healing. One Saturday, I followed him into the converted studio above the bakery, where he'd been preparing for his first local exhibit. "You never told me what this one's called," I said, pointing to a large painting of two silhouettes standing at the edge of a field, the horizon lit in crimson. He looked at it, then at me. "The Color of Tomorrow." I swallowed. "That's beautiful." "So are you," he said without blinking. Later that night, we took a walk through the forest trail behind the cottage. The leaves crunched beneath our feet, and the sky above us was 1,000 shades of soft blue, like dusk was whispering its secrets. Ethan took my hand. "Do you ever think about what you want 5 years from now?" he asked. I hesitated. I used to plan everything down to the details. But now I think I just want peace, space to grow. Love that doesn't demand I shrink. He nodded slowly. "And do you think you could want all that with me?" I stopped walking. The wind blew a strand of hair across my face, and he tucked it behind my ear, his eyes searching mine. "I do," I said. "Then marry me." It wasn't a performance. No ring, no fanfare. Just a question, hanging between two people who had already lost and found so much. I smiled through sudden tears. "Yes." He pulled me into a kiss that tasted like leaves and laughter and second chances. And just like that, the color of tomorrow changed again, this time into something entirely our own. Chapter 13. The Wedding We Didn't Plan. We didn't want a big wedding. After all the chaos our past had thrown at us, simplicity felt like the greatest luxury. No white dress shops, no floral consultations, no seating charts or speeches or distant relatives we hadn't spoken to in years. Just us, just love. We picked a Sunday morning in late October, when the lake was still, the trees half bare, and the air carried that clean kind of cold that wakes you up and makes you feel alive. Ethan wore a navy blue shirt and the same boots he painted in. I wore a vintage cream dress I had found at the secondhand shop in town, soft lace at the sleeves, a fabric that had already lived through someone else's love story. We stood under the willow tree behind the cottage, the one with roots that dug deep and low-hanging branches that made the whole place feel like a secret. Our only guests were Kat, who came all the way from the city to stand beside me, and Jasper, Ethan's old mentor from art school, who wore a wool coat 3 sizes too large and carried a notebook instead of a camera. "You sure about this?" Kat whispered as she handed me a bouquet of dried wildflowers. I smiled. For the first time in my life, I'm not unsure. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. We wrote our own vows, raw, a little awkward, full of pauses, but every word true. "I don't promise to never hurt you," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "But I promise to always face our pain with honesty." "I don't promise to be perfect," I whispered, blinking back tears. "But I promise to stay, especially when it's hard, and to love the version of you that wakes up on the days we feel lost." When it was over, Kat popped a bottle of champagne, Jasper read a poem about time and healing, and we laughed so hard my sides ached. No first dance, no tiers of cake, just firelight, soup in mismatched bowls, and the warmth of 2 people who had already been through the worst, and chosen anyway to begin again. Later, long after the sun had set, Ethan carried me to bed with the kind of care that said, "I see you." Not as broken, but as whole in a way only survivors understand. We made love like we were stitching new memories into the fabric of our bodies. And as I drifted into sleep, I thought, this is the wedding I never knew I wanted. Not the one I dreamed of as a girl, but the one that saved me. Chapter 14. Old Ghosts, New Roads. Marriage didn't silence the ghosts. Some nights I still woke up from dreams of hospital corridors, of cradling emptiness, of the quiet sobs I never let anyone hear. Ethan, always half asleep, would reach for me, his hand finding mine beneath the covers, and I'd squeeze back, a silent signal, I'm here, I'm okay. But trauma doesn't vanish with love. It just finds new places to rest. One day in late November, I got a message from Caleb, my ex-husband. It had been over a year. He kept it short, saw your photos online. You look better. I hope you're happy. I'm sorry. It sat in my inbox for hours, unopened. I stared at the screen like it might explode. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part felt nothing. But the deepest part, the one I used to silence, felt something strange. Peace. I showed Ethan the message that evening. He read it, handed my phone back, and said, "You don't have to reply." I know. I paused. "But I think I want to." He nodded. "Then do it. For you," I typed out a reply, slowly, carefully. "Thank you. I am happy. I hope you find your own peace too." I didn't send it to forgive him. I sent it to free myself. That weekend, Ethan and I drove up the coast, the heater broken, our cheeks red from the cold, but our hands tangled across the gear shift. We stopped in tiny roadside diners, ate cherry pie, and danced to old country songs in parking lots with no one watching. We talked about what scared us. He told me he still had days where he felt like he didn't deserve this life. I told him I sometimes wondered if I'd ever be brave enough to try for a child again. We didn't fix each other, but we didn't flinch from the truth either. On the way back, we passed a small wooden sign that read, "You are now leaving the past." We both laughed. But later, as we lay in bed, I whispered, "I think I did." Did what? Leave the past. Or at least, make peace with the part of me that stayed there for too long. He kissed my forehead. "I never wanted to erase who you were. I just wanted to love who you are now." I pressed my ear to his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Not perfect, but real. And real, I had learned, was enough. Chapter 15. The Quiet After. Winter came like a whisper, slow, soft, silver. Snow dusted the rooftops in Willow Cove. The lake froze over in delicate lace patterns, and our cottage filled with the scent of cinnamon, pine, and turpentine from Ethan's paints. We moved slower, spoke quieter. The world seemed to hush, and in that hush I found something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the aching stillness of grief, but the sacred kind, where nothing hurt and nothing was missing. We spent evenings curled under blankets, sipping tea, reading aloud to each other from our favorite books. Sometimes he painted while I sat nearby with my journal, the scratch of pen and the drag of brush strokes blending into one steady rhythm. I didn't write about pain anymore. I wrote about now, about warmth, about breath against bare shoulders, about how it feels to love with your whole body after forgetting what that meant. One afternoon, I walked past Ethan's studio door and paused. He was inside, standing before a canvas nearly my height. He didn't see me watching. I held my breath. The painting was of a woman, barefoot, standing in the ocean, wind tugging at her dress, her back turned, but her head tilted toward the horizon like she was listening to something no one else could hear. I stepped inside. "She's beautiful," I whispered. "She's you," he said simply. I blinked away sudden tears. "You painted me without asking." "I didn't have to ask," he replied, setting the brush down. "You were already in it before I started." That night, we made love slowly, without urgency. Every touch felt like a promise, every sigh a letting go. And when I woke hours later, snow falling outside the window, Ethan fast asleep beside me, I felt no weight in my chest, no shadow in the corner, just the quiet after the storm. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with thunder or fireworks. Sometimes it's this, a soft snowfall, a warm body beside yours, a future that no longer feels like a question, just a quiet, steady yes. Chapter 16. The Sound of a Beginning. Spring came early that year. The lake thawed before the calendar caught up, and wildflowers pushed their way through the frost-hardened ground like hope refusing to wait its turn. The air smelled like earth, and something inside me shifted, slowly, subtly, but undeniably. I started dreaming of children again. Not like before, not the aching, empty kind of dreams, but soft ones, gentle, full of possibility. One morning, I found myself standing barefoot in the garden behind the cottage, soil beneath my feet, fingers tangled in the roots of new green life. The sun warmed my back. A robin sang from the fence post. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I think I'm ready." When I told Ethan that evening, he didn't answer right away. He just pulled me close and rested his forehead against mine. "Not because something's missing?" he asked softly. "No," I said, "because something finally feels whole." He kissed me, and in that kiss, I felt the promise of all the versions of ourselves we had survived to become. We didn't rush. There were tests, fears, moments where I held my breath waiting for old ghosts to return. But they didn't. Or if they did, they stayed in the corners, quiet and distant, no longer rulers of my world. Months passed. The days grew long. The night I held the test in my hand and saw the word pregnant light up like a secret in the dark, I didn't cry. I smiled. I pressed the stick to my heart and whispered, "Thank you." When I told Ethan, he stared at me like he was afraid to breathe. "You sure?" I nodded, beaming. He sank to his knees, wrapped his arms around my waist, and whispered something I'll never forget. I didn't know I could be this happy. We didn't celebrate loudly. We didn't tell anyone for weeks. We just walked more, talked more, watched the world bloom around us, and whispered to the tiny life inside me like it was already listening. Every flutter in my belly became a note in the melody of our healing. I knew nothing was guaranteed. I knew pain could return. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a woman waiting to break. I felt like a woman beginning again, not because I'd forgotten the past, but because I'd survived it. And the sound of a beginning, it's quieter than you'd expect. It's the beat of two hearts pulsing beneath your skin. It's the whisper of a man saying we're going to be okay. It's the cry of something new rising from the ruins of something old. And it's the voice inside you no longer shaking, saying, "I believe it now. I believe in tomorrow." Chapter 17. When the Wind Changes. The wind shifted the day we heard the baby's heartbeat. It was a sound like no other, fast, frantic, like the flutter of wings against the walls of a cage. But it didn't scare me. It thrilled me. It told me, you're not alone in this body anymore. Ethan squeezed my hand so tightly my fingers tingled. Tears welled in his eyes, though he blinked them back. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "That's our storm, love. That's our thunder." We left the clinic in silence, both wrapped in a feeling too big for words. Back at the cottage, I stood by the window and watched the lake shimmer under the rising wind. The same lake I used to stare at while drowning in memories was now a mirror reflecting something I'd never expected to see again, a future. "Do you ever wonder," I asked Ethan, "if the hardest things we go through make room for the best?" He walked up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his hands over the gentle curve of my belly. "Every day," he said, "you are my proof." But it wasn't all easy. Some days I woke up terrified, of loss, of my body failing me again, of growing close only to be torn apart. I'd stand in the shower too long, let the water scald me until it reminded me I was real. One night I couldn't stop crying. I didn't even know why. Ethan didn't ask questions. He just pulled me into his lap, pressed his hand to my back and said, Let it break if it needs to. I'm still here. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't erase the cracks, but it fills them with gold if you're lucky enough to let love in. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, sometimes the wind changes, not to destroy us, but to lift the pieces of who we were and carry them someplace softer. Chapter 18, The Name We Chose. Choosing a name felt bigger than choosing a house, bigger than marriage even. It felt like choosing a spell, something whispered into the future that would follow our child forever. Ethan sat with his sketchbook one evening, drawing swirls of ink between notes and ideas. I don't want to name her after grief, I said softly. I don't want to carry the past into her first breath. He nodded. Then let's name her for the moment we knew we survived. It took weeks. We tried names from books, from paintings, from wildflowers we'd seen in the hills. Nothing fit until one afternoon I said it without thinking. Sienna, Ethan looked up. Sienna, he repeated. Like the color? Yes. Like fire that doesn't burn. Like something warm, deep, and alive. He smiled. Sienna. We didn't talk about middle names that night. It didn't feel necessary. One word was enough. That name held us both, who we'd been, who we were, and who we were becoming. Later, I stood in front of the mirror, hand on my belly. I whispered it again. Sienna, and I swear she kicked in response. The days grew slower as my body changed. Ethan painted more. Me, I wrote letters to Sienna. I filled a notebook with them. I didn't know if I'd ever let her read them, but I needed to give voice to every emotion I'd buried through the years. I wrote about my own mother, about the baby I once lost, about the woman I used to be, and how I thought I would never return from the dark. I wrote, you aren't here yet, but you've already healed things in me I thought were dead. You've turned my body into something sacred again, not ruined, not wrecked, just real and full and worthy. Some nights Ethan read my letters out loud in bed. His voice cracked once when he reached the line, I didn't believe in forever until you started growing inside me. He paused, kissed the curve of my stomach, and said, neither did I. Chapter 19, Things We Promise. The closer I came to meeting her, the more I understood the quiet bravery of beginnings. We spent the last weeks of the pregnancy making promises, not just to Sienna, but to each other. Little ones, honest ones, the kind that held more weight than any vow I'd ever said in church. I promise, Ethan whispered one night, that when she cries at 3 a.m., I won't pretend to be asleep. I laughed, cupping his cheek. I promise not to let the laundry pile bury us, for at least the first month. He grinned, and I promised to tell her stories about how fierce her mom is, even when she's covered in mashed banana. Then I promise, I said, voice cracking, that I'll never forget who I am. Not just a mother, not just your partner, but me, the woman who came through the fire. We held each other in the hush that followed, knowing these weren't just words. They were anchors, and we needed them, because we'd both seen what happens when love drifts unmoored. One afternoon, I woke to find Ethan in the nursery. The walls now painted the soft color of dusk. He stood beside the crib, holding a tiny sweater he'd knit himself, burnt orange, like autumn leaves in warmth. He didn't notice me at first. He was staring at the sweater like it held magic. She's not even here yet, I said from the doorway. I know, he whispered, but I already miss her. I walked in, placed my hands over his. She'll be ours soon. We sat on the floor beside the crib, legs tangled, hearts open. He told me about his fears, about not knowing his own father, about making mistakes, about how love had always terrified him more than anything else. I used to think I didn't deserve it, he said, staring at his hands. But you made me want to be worthy. You already are, I told him. He looked at me then with the softest eyes I'd ever seen, and I knew, no matter what happened, our daughter would grow up knowing what gentleness looked like on a man. We promised one more thing that night, that no matter how loud the world got, no matter how tired or lost we felt, we would find our way back to each other over and over. Because sometimes the most powerful love story isn't the one that burns fast. It's the one that stays. Chapter 20, The First Cry. It happened on a night the sky broke open with thunder. I had barely slept the night before, my body aching with that deep, ancient heaviness that only comes when life is moments away from arriving. Ethan was nervous, more than he let on, but he never left my side. Every contraction, every tremble of breath, he was there, whispering, holding, anchoring. "I've got you," he kept saying. "You're not alone." I wasn't. Not for a single second. The storm raged outside as we rushed to the hospital. The roads were slick. The wipers swiped away rain that looked like tears from some god overhead. And inside me, she was coming, strong, certain, hours blurred, time bent around pain and hope. I screamed. I laughed once, delirious, from the absurdity of it all. And then, just when I thought I had nothing left to give, I heard it. Her cry, sharp, fierce, alive. The room stilled, and so did I. They placed her on my chest, and I looked down into the smallest, most important eyes I had ever seen. And the world made sense in a way it never had before. I was crying. Ethan was crying. The nurse smiled and said softly, "You did it." No, we did. Back at home, the world had changed. Sienna slept in bursts, her tiny body curled like punctuation in a poem I was still learning how to read. Ethan walked her up and down the hallway when I needed to sleep. He sang off-key lullabies, told her stories of stars and forests, and a woman who once thought she was broken. I wasn't broken, not anymore. I was stretched, reshaped, carved into something new. But not broken. I watched them together, father and daughter, and felt the gravity of all I'd almost missed. The grief hadn't disappeared. The memory of the child I lost before her still visited me sometimes, like a shadow just out of reach. But now there was also light. Real, tangible, unbearable light. And Sienna, our fire, our softness, our second chance, she was the sound of every beginning we thought we'd lost. Chapter 21, A Letter to Myself. I wrote the letter one quiet afternoon, with Sienna asleep against my chest and the scent of lavender from her blanket curling around us like fog. It wasn't for her. It was for me, the woman I had been. Dear me, I see you. I remember you, sitting in the doctor's office, holding your breath while they told you there was no heartbeat. Walking out of a courtroom, fingers cold from signing papers that ended 5 years of trying, packing boxes in the middle of the night so you wouldn't have to see your old life in daylight. I remember how you stood on that beach the first week in Windmere, your hair whipped wild by the ocean wind, your hands in your pockets like you could hide all your shaking. I remember how alone you felt. And I wish I could hold you now. I'd tell you, keep going. Not because it'll get easier quickly, but because one day you'll walk into a little art gallery with chipped windows and meet a man with quiet eyes who sees all the chaos in you and doesn't flinch. One day you'll hold a baby girl who smells like milk and new skin, and you'll understand why your heart had to be broken wide open to make room for her. One day you'll stand in a home you made yourself, wall by wall, moment by moment, and you'll realize you're not lost anymore. You are found, not by someone else, by yourself. You are not the woman who was left. You are the woman who stayed, with herself, with love, you. When I finished reading it aloud, Ethan walked in with a cup of tea and sat beside me. "What were you writing?" he asked. "A love letter," I whispered, kissing Sienna's forehead, to the one who needed it the most. Chapter 22, The View from Here. It's been a year. Sienna is walking now, wobbling through rooms like she owns the place, laughter trailing behind her like sunlight on the floor. Her first word was moon, because Ethan always pointed to it in the sky and whispered, "Look, sweetheart, the moon is always with us, even when we can't see it. Our house smells like paint and coffee and sometimes like diapers and forgotten toast, but it's ours. The gallery is thriving. I photograph families now, moments of tenderness, newborns cradled in trembling hands. I still cry sometimes when I press the shutter, because life is fragile and beautiful and cruel and breathtaking. The porch faces the sea. We drink wine out there when Sienna's asleep. Sometimes we don't talk, sometimes we do. But it's always enough. I still think of the woman I used to be, not with shame, not even with sorrow, but with gratitude. She walked through fire, she buried dreams, she let go of people who weren't meant to stay, and she found herself again, slowly, stubbornly, and in her own time. One evening, as the sky split open in lavender and gold, Ethan pulled me close and said, "I love the view from here." He meant the porch, the ocean, but I looked at Sienna toddling toward us, cheeks pink with sunset, and I looked at him, the man who once only spoke in shadows, and I smiled. "The view from here," I said, "is everything